The old Jeep turned sharply around a dusty bend, its tires grinding over the cracked road like it was driving on the dry, rough skin of an ancient land scorched by relentless sun. Mid-August in West Texas was no place for the faint-hearted. No shade, no cool streams, only hot winds blowing like a forge's blast and a suspiciously eerie silence hanging over the wild grasslands. Jack Reynolds, a sergeant in the U.S. Army, rested one hand on the steering wheel, the other wiping sweat trickling down his sun-browned jaw. The sunlight slanted through the windshield, making his eyes squint with fatigue. His visit to his grandmother had just ended, and now he was heading back to base, where long, weary shifts and calls from his commander always awaited. But that afternoon, something kept Jack's gaze fixed on the road ahead. An unusual, almost sacred silence lingered in the air. Not the peaceful quiet of the countryside, but a stillness that made a war-hardened man wary. Jack had survived the ruined streets of Fallujah, heard the crack of bullets piercing the night, and understood loss, knowing not everyone returned. But this silence was different. It carried no gunfire, only a silent warning, a lone heartbeat out of place between earth and sky. At that moment, he saw it. At first, it was just a dark spot on the glaring ground, like a forgotten torn piece of cloth. But as he got closer, a chill ran down his spine. He slammed the brakes, the Jeep screeching to a halt, tires kicking up a thin veil of smoke on the scorching road. His heart pounded in his chest as he reached for the wooden baton usually kept in the back trunk, a military reflex ingrained deep in his blood. Stepping out, a wave of heat hit him like a slap. But Jack barely felt it. His attention was fixed on the sight before him, a tiny creature curled up by the roadside. It was a puppy, its fur, once maybe dark gray or black-brown, now matted with mud and dried blood. Its body was so emaciated that every rib showed beneath stretched, thin skin, its eyes barely open, glassy like frosted glass, trembling with each faint, shallow breath. But what stopped Jack in his tracks wasn't just the puppy's condition. It was the creatures surrounding it. 5, maybe 6, jet-black vultures circled patiently, step by step as if performing a ritual before their meal. They showed no fear of humans. One even spread its wide wings, as if to emphasize that this feast belonged to them, and the man had no right to interfere. Jack tightened his grip on the baton. A feeling surged within his chest, not anger, but pain. Something deeply human and alive burst forth from inside. No one deserved to die like this, quietly and forgotten, under the cold eyes of vultures, and certainly not a fragile creature still breathing. He didn't know where the puppy came from or why it lay there. But one thing was clear. He couldn't just walk away. And with that first step toward the small life, a story began. An unexpected journey. A puppy on the verge of death. A soldier who seemed to have shut down his heart. And a bond that would change both their fates. Jack walked slowly toward the small creature lying motionless at the roadside, the hot wind whistling past his ears as if warning him that this place was no place for life. But he was used to that feeling, the instinctual call whenever faced with something dying. The ground beneath his feet burned like hot coals, but he barely noticed. His eyes never left the vultures circling patiently, like executioners taking their time to finish off a victim. They showed no fear of him. One even took a half-step forward, its coal-black eyes staring directly at Jack as if to say, "This isn't your concern." But Jack didn't let that stop him. The closer he got, the more he realized the fragile shape on the ground was not a ragged scrap as he had first thought. It was a puppy, too young to understand this cruel world, yet bearing all the marks of suffering. Its short, charcoal-gray fur was dirty and matted, patches missing from hunger and infection. Its ribs protruded sharply, as if trying to pierce the skin. Its 2 back legs were oddly folded, maybe from impact, or worse, intentional abuse. Jack paused for a second. Not from fear, but from the injustice unfolding right before his eyes that clouded his thoughts. This was America, Texas, the land he had sworn to protect, fight for, and bleed for. Yet here lay a tiny life abandoned beneath the open sky, as if no one cared. He bent down slowly. The puppy's eyes fluttered open, dull like dusty glass. But beneath was a faint, fragile light, a look not begging for help, no longer expecting anything. It was simply a fragment of a soul unwilling to leave. A strange smell rose, not the foul stench of death, but a mix of dried blood, waste, and the hot breath of a fading life. "Hey, little one," Jack whispered, his voice trembling without him realizing it. "What the hell happened to you?" He reached out, gently placing his hand on the rough fur of the puppy's chest, feeling a faint, shaky heartbeat, like a small stream trickling through a thirsty land. Then, as if that touch stirred something near extinguished, a soft groan escaped, not of pain, but a sigh as if the puppy finally felt noticed. Jack carefully lifted one of the puppy's back legs. In the sunlight, he saw a faint series of numbers tattooed on the soft, limp skin, a military marking. His eyes immediately recognized it. It was an ID code from the K-9 training program. German shepherds were bred and trained for battlefield service, detecting explosives, guarding soldiers, and life-or-death missions. But not all dogs passed the test. Those deemed unqualified were sometimes discarded. Officially, they were supposed to be rehomed, given to adoptive families, or retained for other purposes. But in reality, some places bent the rules, quietly wiping them out. This puppy, Jack knew, was one such victim. A creature is judged a failure. A product is thrown away, and no one thought it deserved to live. Jack took off his camouflage shirt and gently wrapped it around the tiny body. As he lifted the puppy, it did not resist or react, as if it had accepted any ending. But in Jack's heart, that only fueled his determination. He hurried back to the Jeep. Before closing the door, he glanced at the vultures, still standing there, backing away a few steps but not leaving. They knew, and so did he. This fight was far from over. The Jeep roared to life, protesting the heat. Jack turned the air conditioning toward the passenger seat, where the puppy lay. Its eyes were closed, but its chest still rose and fell lightly. There was still time. Jack gripped the wheel tightly. "Hang on, kid," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm not going to let you die like this." And with the puppy in the Jeep, beneath the scorching Texas afternoon sun, a life was saved. And a promise was made, from a soldier who seemed to have locked away his heart, to a creature who had never really been cared for. Jack drove recklessly through the burning heat of a Texas afternoon. One hand gripped the steering wheel tightly, while the other kept reaching across to the passenger seat, gently holding the tiny body wrapped in a faded shirt. The weak whine of the old air conditioner barely eased the heat, but Jack still aimed the vent straight at the fragile life, a silent prayer that the faint breath would not fade. The puppy lay motionless, its eyes barely open like two cracked wounds on the earth. Its dirty fur held no distinct color, just a grayish mix of dust, dried blood, and the marks of days abandoned without food, water, or anyone to hear its silent cries. Each breath was a struggle, as its tiny chest rose and fell. Slow, broken, as if caught between life and death. Jack glanced at the dashboard. The engine temperature warning light blinked red. Old vehicle, weak air conditioning, engine overheating. But he couldn't stop. Not now, not while those eyes were still open. "Just keep breathing, kid," he murmured, as if repeating the words could somehow stretch the thread of life a little longer. Each mile passed with Jack holding his breath. He had no idea how far the nearest vet was. No phone signal, no map loading. All he had was the endless road and a life fading into silence. But one thing he knew clearer than anything else. He could not let this dog die, not after everything it had been through. That familiar feeling returned, The feeling only those who have stood on the front lines know. The feeling of a life slipping through your fingers and the helplessness that squeezes your heart tight. He had held comrades in his arms, blood seeping through their uniforms, calling their names amid gunfire, only to meet their final, silent, shattered gaze. This time, he wouldn't allow that ending. The Jeep jolted, hitting a big pothole, shaking the small body on the passenger seat. Jack reached out quickly to steady the dog, his eyes scanning the horizon. Then, as if guided by instinct, a weathered wooden sign appeared by the roadside. Oak Ridge Animal Clinic, 12 miles. Hope sparked inside him like the first flame in a night. He turned sharply onto the gravel road, wheels skidding lightly, dust billowing everywhere. Come on, kid, just a little further. He didn't know if the puppy heard him. But in that brief moment, its soft ears twitched slightly. Just a faint movement, but real. And for Jack, even that was enough to drive faster. The dirt road into the small town was rough. Deep holes, jagged rocks, sharp turns where one slip could send the Jeep off the grass verge. But Jack didn't stop. He leaned over the passenger seat, adjusting the puppy's position. Its head tilted to keep airways clear, its hips cushioned by the shirt, its small body cradled gently. When he braked hard at the clinic's door, a cloud of dust rose like smoke from gunfire. He honked repeatedly, and within seconds, a woman burst out, her hair tied high, scrub top stained with patches of disinfectant. "What's going on?" she shouted, squinting against the sun and dust. Jack didn't answer immediately. He opened the door, lifting the puppy with both hands, as if handling a cracked piece of porcelain, every step careful and tender. "Abandoned puppy," he said, breath ragged. "By the roadside. Vultures were already there. I don't know if we're in time." The vet froze for a moment, then immediately opened the door wider. "Bring it inside now." Inside, the sharp smell of antiseptic and the bright white light shining on the cold metal table greeted them. Jack set the puppy down, his hands reluctant to let go until the vet gently pushed them aside. She began her examination. Temperature, pulse, skin, eyes. Another nurse rushed in with an IV drip, while Jack stood silently, still clutching his left arm as if restraining an old memory surfacing. And at that moment, as the vet attached a tiny IV line to the puppy's front leg, Jack realized he was witnessing a creature fighting for life most purely. No weapons, no words, no resistance, only a faint breath, a subtle twitch, an invisible will to survive. He didn't know its name, didn't know where it came from or why it was abandoned. But one thing he knew for sure: if it was strong enough to survive the scorching heat, the vultures, the days without touch, it deserved a name worthy of the courage it had shown. Jack stepped back, looking at the puppy, still motionless, but now its side moved gently with the drip. Its brown eyes remained shut, but no longer carried the look of surrender. He whispered as if speaking to himself. Valor. No one asked why. Perhaps because at that moment everyone understood. That name was more than just a label. It was proof of bravery, evidence that even a being once cast away could choose to live. And from that day on, the life of a nameless dog changed course, not by magic, but by a soldier who had once lost himself, finding humanity again in the nearly extinguished eyes of a soul no one had truly cared for. Jack's hand slowly released as the young woman in latex gloves gently took the small creature from his arms. There was something in her eyes that made him let go, not because the worry faded, but because he realized he was no longer alone in the fight for this life. Emily Carter, the veterinarian in charge at Oak Ridge Clinic, had just turned 30, but in her warm brown eyes was the hardened experience of someone who had stood many times at the boundary of life and death. She didn't ask unnecessary questions, didn't panic. She only nodded softly as she looked at the puppy's folded ears and unevenly rising chest. "Get the IV ready. Prepare Ringer's solution. Warm towels and a heat lamp. I need a blood sugar test." Immediately. Emily's commands were calm but firm, and the young nurse dashed off like the wind. Emily returned to the puppy, placing 2 fingers on its thin neck, searching for a pulse. Her brow furrowed almost instantly. "Too weak," she whispered, not to Jack but almost as if to herself. Jack stood silently beside the metal table. He could hear the soft clink of metal, the rustle of paper, the beep of monitoring machines, blending into a fragile melody between life and hope. But the only sound he truly heard was the faint, ragged breathing of the small creature. Emily cut away the shirt Jack had wrapped around the puppy. The very first shield that had protected this life, now split in 2 like a marker for a new beginning. "Where did you find it?" Emily asked, eyes never leaving the dog. "By the roadside, between the earth and a circle of vultures," Jack replied, his voice dropping as if he still couldn't believe what he'd seen. Emily looked up, her eyes passing over his face, not just the look of a vet, but of someone who understood that what he had been through was far from ordinary. "No collar, no chip, nothing," Jack added. "Only a faded canine tattoo. It was a trained dog." Emily paused a beat, her hand still threading the IV into the puppy's front leg, but her eyes suddenly changed, colder, sharper. "That's not what I wanted to hear right now," she said softly, but with a steel edge beneath the compassion. "A service dog doesn't deserve to be left to die in the dust." Jack nodded, his throat dry. He didn't know what to say, and in truth, he understood no words were necessary. For the next 20 minutes, Emily and her assistant worked like a finely tuned machine. They wrapped the dog in warming towels, took turns dripping water into its mouth, measured temperature, and checked pupil reflexes. And Jack, a man used to leading and commanding, now could only sit quietly on a plastic chair by the wall, watching every movement of the creature lying there. The puppy neither struggled nor whimpered. Its small body seemed to have used every last ounce of strength just to wait. No fight, but no surrender. A strange silence Jack had never seen in any soldier, human or animal. When all the machines stabilized, Emily stepped away from the care area, removing her gloves and washing her hands in the stainless steel sink by the wall. Cold water flowed over her hands, washing away sweat, dust, and some of the things left unspoken. "You can come see it now," she said, her tone softened. "But don't startle it. It's on a mild sedative. The body is still in shock." Jack rose slowly. He followed her down a narrow corridor, past patient records, rows of empty cages, and shelves of medicines. The air in the recovery room was heavy, not from chemicals, but from the silent waiting that filled the space. There lay Valor, under the soft light of the heat lamp, wrapped in a cotton blanket, its head resting on a small pale blue pillow. A small monitor blinked its heartbeat, slow but steady. Its ears twitched slightly as Jack approached, recognizing a familiar scent. He knelt, reaching out very gently, afraid to break the fragile balance. His hand brushed lightly over Valor's head. The skin beneath the coarse fur was still warm. "My little friend," Jack whispered. "We're just getting started. Don't give up now." Behind him, Emily stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the soldier sitting beside the dog he had just pulled back from the edge of life. She said nothing, just tilted her head slightly, realizing some rescues were meant not only for one life. When Emily quietly left the recovery room, leaving only the sound of the heart monitor and the faint breaths of the tiny life, Jack remained kneeling beside the dog, his eyes never leaving the small face swaying gently on the warm blanket. At that moment, for the first time since picking the puppy up from the dusty ground, he truly had time to look at it, not through the eyes of a soldier in an emergency, but with a silent attentiveness, as if listening to the story its body was still trying to tell through every scar, every bruise, every patch of lost fur. He gently lifted one of the puppy's back legs, using his fingertips to flip the skin inside the thigh, where he had caught a glimpse of a familiar mark by the roadside. Under the soft glow of the heat lamp, the old ink appeared clearer, a short string of characters, a series of numbers and letters tattooed in faded black ink near the base of the thigh. Jack needed no more than 3 seconds to recognize it. Canine EXPDT-27, an internal code, part of the pilot series for military working dogs. And not just any. EXP stood for Experimental, a specialized breeding program for highly tactical dog lines, often reserved for top-secret missions. He shuddered. Not because the code was strange, but because he had been trained to understand what such markings meant. Dogs in this program were selectively bred from the best bloodlines, quick reflexes, super-sensitive scent detection, long memory, and absolute loyalty. But if any irregularity appeared during training, unwanted reactions, signs of fear, unstable behavior, they were removed from the program. And scarier still, not all were placed into homes as pets. Some were wiped out, literally. No records, no reports. Jack let go of the leg, looking down at the tiny life resting among the warm blankets and IV lines. A puppy, only a few months old, discarded like a broken device, left there in silence, in dust, surrounded by vultures, as if someone wanted its death to go unnoticed. And most terrifyingly, perhaps that person never expected the dog to survive. The door creaked open softly. Emily returned, holding a hastily printed test result, her eyes scanning Jack's contemplative face. "You checked the tattoo again?" she asked, without beating around the bush. Jack nodded. "High-level military training program." She exhaled sharply, placing the paper on the table. "Initial body temperature, 104 degrees. Very close to the critical limit for a small dog. Severe hypoglycemia. Not to mention old injuries, rib fractures, and deep bruises on the hind leg. No signs of stitches or treatment, meaning it was left untreated for a long time." Jack looked back at the dog. It remained still, unresponsive, but something about the way its chest moved, no longer helpless, but persistent. "Do you know why I stopped when I saw it?" Jack suddenly asked. Emily listened silently. "Because I've seen that look before," he continued. "In the mirror, when I came back from my last mission, sitting alone in the night, not speaking to anyone, not touching anyone, and starting to believe maybe I didn't deserve to exist anymore." Emily didn't respond. She just looked at the man before her, someone who entered the clinic as a gruff soldier, but was now confiding in a tiny creature unable to reply. "But that look," Jack whispered. "It made me unable to turn away." Emily sat down beside him. After a moment, she spoke softly. "It doesn't have a name yet." Jack didn't look away, only glanced at the dog. "I'm calling it Valor." She smiled. A genuine smile, not pity, not pretense. "Well then, Valor," she said, looking down at the creature sleeping beneath the heat lamp. "Welcome back." Emily didn't ask any further questions after hearing the name leave Jack's lips. She only nodded quietly, her eyes resting briefly on the gaunt face of the tiny being sleeping under the warming light. "Valor," she repeated softly, as if to help the name take solid shape in the air, as if simply calling it aloud would let the weary soul inside know it was no longer invisible. Jack remained seated by the recovery bed, elbows resting on his knees, hands intertwined, eyes fixed on the dog. Every movement of the once battle-hardened soldier was now slower, gentler, almost cautious, as if afraid to touch a fragile shard of glass lest it shatter in his hands. He hadn't expected to name it so soon. Not even when he picked it up by the roadside. Not when he hurried through the scorching midday sun, looking for a place that could keep its fragile breath alive a little longer. But now, in the quiet room, with all the machines stable and the faint heartbeat still pulsing like a sign of clinging life, the name came to him like something undeniable. Valor. That word was more than a name. It was a concept, an acknowledgement, a way for Jack to call out what the dog had taught him in just a few short hours. He had once thought courage existed only on battlefields, where gunfire tore through the air and decisions were made in the split second between life and death. But now, looking at the small being curled beneath the blanket, Jack realized there was another kind of courage. Quiet, silent, needing no witness. It was the persistence to survive even when no one expected you to live. This dog was abandoned, judged a failure, and left to die as if it had never existed. Despite the pain and loneliness, it kept that breath alive. And that alone was enough to earn the name Valor. Jack leaned forward, gently touching the dog's forehead. His rough, calloused hand, worn from years of training and fighting, trembled lightly as it brushed the sparse, still-burning fur. It felt like touching something primal, a life pulled back from the edge of death. "Valor," he whispered. "I don't know if you can hear me, but from now on, you have a name. And I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." No answer came, but those small ears twitched slightly. Maybe just a reflex, but Jack felt a quiet calm settle inside him. He sighed gently, not from physical exhaustion, but from the feeling of letting go of an invisible burden, making room for something new. Responsibility, connection, and a fragile spark of hope. Emily returned with a clean, thin blanket folded neatly in her hands. She walked to the bedside and looked at Jack for a moment before speaking. "You did something big," she said softly, like a breath. Jack looked up. "It's just a name." Emily shook her head. "Number A name means you saw it. Not as an emergency case, not as a burden, but as a life." She bent down, adjusted the blanket around Valor, and then pulled out a pen to write the new name into the open medical record on the desk. Valor Reynolds, breed, German Shepherd, estimated age 10 weeks, condition, recovery. Brought in by Jack Reynolds. Just a few words, but Jack felt as if he had signed a pledge. Something irreversible. And he didn't want to undo it. Because for the first time in years, after the war, after fallen comrades, after sleepless nights, he felt not alone anymore. This little dog, somehow, had become a part of him in just a few hours. Not out of pity, but because Jack saw himself in it. A warrior seemingly forgotten by the world, yet still fighting to live, still holding on to the last warmth left. That night, Jack didn't leave the recovery room. He sat beside Valor, his hands never leaving the warm blanket, ears perked for every skipped or slowed heartbeat beep. When Valor gasped, Jack silently counted each breath. When the pup whimpered softly, he whispered meaningless words, as if language could soothe some nightmare in the puppy's sleep. No one told him to stay. No one said he needed to keep vigil, but Jack knew well. It wasn't Valor who needed him there. It was himself who needed to feel that he could still protect a life, simply by being by its side. In the quiet stillness of that first night bearing a new name, Valor no longer lay alone. And the soldier who seemed to have lost all feeling was no longer alone either. As the soft morning light timidly slipped through the fogged glass of the recovery room, casting quiet streaks of illumination on the pale gray tiles, Jack still hadn't left the wooden chair beside the stainless steel table. He hadn't slept all night, not because he feared the machines would stop, nor solely out of worry for the tiny life, but because of something silent and hard to name that held him there. He had never stayed by anyone's side like this, not beside a comrade in a field hospital, not even beside his old wounds. But last night, for the first time, Jack chose to stay, just to sit there, just to not leave. And at that very moment, when the room was filled only with the sound of the heart monitor and the cold wind whistling outside the glass, a small miracle happened. The little dog stirred slightly. The movement was so small it could have been missed, but not by Jack's ever watchful eyes. He leaned toward the table, his hands that had once gripped guns now gently lifting the thin blanket covering the tiny chest. Valor, the name given the night before, was trying. His front legs twitched, trembling like overstretched strings on a guitar. His head tilted slightly, a faint whimper escaping his lips. Not from pain, but as if the boy was calling himself back from a distant, misty place. Jack held his breath. He dared not intervene nor speak, All his attention was wrapped tightly around every tiny effort of the struggling life to return. Try a bit more. Valor's left leg slipped. He fell sideways, his fragile body collapsing to one side. But then he curled up again, pushing himself up. This time his right leg held out one more second. To Jack, that silence was overwhelmingly precious. He didn't know if his years in the military had trained him to see victory in the smallest things. But what he saw now was a real battle happening right there on the iron bed. And Valor, by some instinct humans could never learn, had chosen to fight. Emily entered the room just then, carrying a bowl of liquid food and a water bottle. She stopped at the doorway, eyes immediately following Jack's gaze. "He's trying to stand?" Jack nodded quietly, eyes never leaving the tiny creature. "He's fallen 3 times already, but he keeps trying." Emily stepped closer, setting the tray on the table and bending down to look closely. Valor was breathing heavily, chest heaving, but not retreating. He pushed up with his legs, and this time, with an all-out effort, Valor managed to stand, shaky, unsteady, but his 2 legs supported his body. Jack and Emily were both speechless. At that moment, no words were spoken, not because they didn't know what to say, but because some moments were too sacred for any interruption. In the gentle light streaming through the window, Valor stood there, unsteady, faltering, and utterly real. "This isn't just physical recovery," Emily whispered. "It's a choice to live. Some dogs, after severe shock when rescued, choose to lie still, refuse to eat, refuse to respond, quietly slip away, even though their bodies could still live." She looked up at Jack, her eyes full of meaning. He chose the opposite. Jack knelt, leveling with Valor. The little dog took a shaky step toward him, then collapsed onto the floor. But his tail wagged lightly. For the first time since they met, there was a response not just for survival, but for connection. Jack reached out, placing his palm close to Valor's face. And what nearly made him laugh was when the dog tilted his head, sniffed gently, then licked Jack's finger once. Not instinct, but recognition. "You remember me, huh?" Jack whispered hoarsely. "Good job, little warrior." Emily handed Jack a warm water bottle and a small towel. "I need to prepare some supplements. Can you help me clean him up? Gently wipe his body, keep him warm." "Sure," Jack replied immediately. No hesitation. No instructions are needed. He took the bottle like a soldier accepting an order. No longer an unwilling nurse, but a caretaker, a companion. As he wiped Valor's belly, Jack noticed every old bruise, every short scar-like line of memory on a painful map. This boy had endured more than any small creature should. But today, here under his hands, he was being reborn. The first day of recovery ended with a liquid meal that Valor barely managed 2 small spoonfuls of. But just the act of licking the spoon, moving his lips and swallowing, was enough for Emily to nod and for Jack to feel some weight lift from his heart. When evening came, Jack didn't hesitate this time. He spread a blanket right at the foot of the table. Valor curled up beside him, head resting on a soft corner of the pillow. No one ordered him to do so. No military rule required it. But he understood. Recovery wasn't just medicine and time. It was a presence. And for the first time, Valor no longer lay there as an abandoned creature. He had a name. He had someone beside him. He had his first steps, shaky but steady. And Jack, the soldier who seemed to have no room left in his heart for anything fragile, had placed his trust in the smallest, weakest, and bravest being he had ever known. The next morning dawned in unusual silence. Jack woke not to a clock or sunlight, but to a faint twitch in the arm resting on the thin blanket, where Valor had lain all night, curled up, his head resting lightly against Jack's arm as a quiet confirmation of, "I'm still here." Jack stirred gently, pulling the blanket up over Valor's shoulders to keep the lingering warmth. The boy still slept, breathing steadier than previous nights, and his body seemed less rigid. The tentative steps from the day before, though fragile, had planted a seed of hope in Jack. But that hope was still delicate, and Jack understood that what Valor had endured left scars deeper than skin. Because that night, for the first time since being rescued, Valor began to dream. At first, it was a tiny movement. Valor curled up, his front leg twitched, and then his whole body tensed as if pulled into a memory no one could see. Jack thought it was a harmless seizure from fever, but then Valor whimpered, a sound unlike any he had heard from the little dog before. It wasn't a cry of pain, it was a cry of fear, primal, deep fear, as if something was squeezing Valor from the inside. In the dim light of the room, Jack sat up abruptly. He softly called, "Valor!" Then again, "Hey, little buddy, it's okay." But Valor didn't wake. He trembled in waves, legs kicking wildly at the air, whining louder, then suddenly let out a piercing, terrified scream. A scream, hoarse, strangled, distorted, but a panic attack erupting from sleep. Jack froze. At that moment, a flash appeared in his mind. A young soldier in battle, screaming amid smoke and gunfire, eyes wide with terror, chest thrashing though his wounds were beyond saving. Then himself, on the cold concrete floor of the barracks, on the night after returning home, when the first nightmare struck. Jack understood better than anyone, for he had also been hunted in his dreams, submerged in nameless memories where explosions, blood, and an invisible void mixed. Without hesitation, Jack knelt beside Valor, placing a gentle hand on the dog's back. "Shh, it's okay, Valor, I'm here." Valor whimpered still. His small body stiffened, tail pressed tight against him, teeth clenched as if caught in an inescapable whirlpool. But when Jack laid his whole palm on Valor's chest, where the heart pounded fast, the dog suddenly startled, then opened his eyes. Valor's eyes were wide, filled with confusion, unaware of his surroundings. He breathed heavily, looking around as if seeking escape. But when those eyes met Jack's, somehow, Valor stopped. Not necessarily because he knew he was safe, but perhaps because a familiar feeling had touched something inside. Jack spoke softly. "It's okay. Just a dream. You're not there anymore." After a moment, Valor slowly nestled his head into Jack's elbow. No more whimpering. No more trembling. Just breathing, tired, weary. But seemingly that breath had found a new rhythm alongside the heartbeat of the one beside him. The next morning, when Emily came to check, she noticed something different in Valor's eyes. Not emptiness, but a tiredness that held memory. "He's starting to remember," she said. "Not everything, but enough to make sleep restless." Jack nodded. "Last night, he screamed like he was pulled back to the place he was abandoned." Emily sighed, her gaze softening. "Psychological trauma in dogs is no different from humans. Some remember through sounds, some through smells, some through the body." She placed a vitamin vial on the table. "I can help him eat again. I can help him walk, run, and play. But the things deep in his mind only time and companionship can heal." Jack looked at Valor, now lying on the worn pillow, head tilted to one side, eyes following his every move. Though tired, those eyes were different, no longer utterly lost. Something fragile was forming. "Trust. Then I'll be that person," Jack whispered, "until he's strong enough to dream without fear." And then, as a silent reply, Valor shifted closer, his front paw lightly touching Jack's limp hand. No sound, no clear gesture. But to Jack, that movement was a promise. They had stepped into the storm together, and now they would learn to weather the nightmares, not just once, but as many times as needed, as long as they had each other. That morning, as the first rays of sunlight quietly settled on the doorstep of the veterinary clinic, Jack sat silently in the pale golden light, holding a cup of coffee long since gone cold without taking a sip. He didn't need caffeine to stay awake. The night before had been nearly sleepless, but instead of feeling tired, his body felt held by something lighter than a breath, and stronger than any military order that had ever governed him. Valor was still sleeping beside him, his head resting gently against Jack's foot, his breathing steadier than in previous nights. The fur around his neck and back was beginning to grow thick again, and the bruise on his shoulder had faded considerably. But it wasn't the physical improvements that caught Jack's attention the most. It was the way Valor gradually changed every time he entered the room. Just a few days ago, whenever Jack reached out his hand, the puppy would curl up, eyes wide with alertness, as if every movement could turn into a strike. But now, the boy no longer flinched. There were moments when Valor actively sought him out, pressing his head against Jack's sleeve, lying quietly as if that spot, despite the smell of medicine, the fabric dust, and the calloused skin, was the safest place in the world he had ever known. It was then Jack realized something he hadn't been prepared for. Every small behavior from Valor mirrored parts of the soul he had buried after countless deployments, hurried embraces at funerals, and automatic replies of, "I'm fine." He had thought he was the only one carrying unseen scars, but Valor bore them too, on his back, in his eyes, and deep within his restless sleep. That windless afternoon, as they sat together on the wooden porch behind the clinic, perhaps for the first time since they met, neither needed to speak. No signals, no soothing words, just presence. Jack placed a small notebook on his knee, flipping it open to a blank page. He wrote Valor right in the center, the first stroke of a pen after months of silence. Then below, instead of training commands like a soldier once would, he wrote tiny notes. He finished half his bowl today. Valor no longer startles at the sound of falling dishes. First time he wagged his tail when I walked in. That page wasn't medical information. It was a journal of a bond, where each small progress was recorded as a victory, each slight change treasured like something sacred. That evening, when Emily returned with a bag of special food and some vitamin vials, she paused at the back door, watching the two figures, a tall soldier with a slightly hunched posture, and a small dog lying beside him, breathing evenly with half-closed eyes, like two opposite shapes strangely merging into one. "He's bonded with you faster than I thought," Emily said softly, setting the bag on the table. "Not bonded," Jack replied, without turning his head. "I think we found each other." Emily sat on the porch step, keeping a distance enough not to scare Valor, but close enough to see the gentle look the boy gave when he realized she wasn't a threat. "Did you know he only sleeps peacefully when you're beside him?" she asked. Jack nodded, gently stroking Valor's spine. "Me too." No one smiled. The words weren't a joke. They were true. For the first nights, Jack slept silently. With Valor were also the first nights he didn't jolt awake from dreams, didn't hear thunderous explosions, didn't see the faces of fallen friends. For the first time in years, Jack began to feel he was no longer alone in the relentless inner battle. And for the first time, he allowed his heart to soften. Not out of duty, not out of responsibility, but because of a little dog who chose to live and chose to trust him. When night fell, Jack laid Valor down on a thin mattress beside the bed. Then instead of going to bed as usual, he lay on the floor next to him, curling up close. Valor shifted closer, kneeling into his chest like a child. No more whimpering, no more startles. And in the gentle darkness, the hearts of two beings, a man who once thought he was hardened beyond feeling, and a dog once abandoned, beat in unison. A peaceful, simple, but deeply real life. The following days passed with a quiet yet steady rhythm, much like how Valor was slowly recovering piece by piece. Jack began to notice that every morning, when the sunlight first hit the windowsill, Valor would stretch, shake his head a few times, and seek out Jack's hand before readying himself to greet the new day. No need to call, no need to wait. The boy had learned that every dawn was a new chance at life. Then one dry, sun-warmed noon filled with chirping birds beyond the wooden fence, the first new person outside Emily to enter Jack and Valor's life appeared. His name was Ethan, a 10-year-old, skinny and lively boy, living with his mother on a small farm about 5 minutes' walk from Emily's clinic. That day, Ethan happened to be passing by, delivering fresh milk his mother had made for the clinic, and as he stepped onto the porch, his eyes suddenly paused, not on the man tending to plants, but on the little dog resting in the shade by the doorstep. "Whose dog is that?" Ethan asked, his eyes shining in a way Jack immediately recognized, the look of a child seeing something that made his heart flutter. Jack turned just in time to see Valor lift his head toward the unfamiliar voice. His ears perked in alertness but did not pull back, just a scrutinizing gaze, much like how he had looked at things lately, wary, but no longer afraid. "His name is Valor," Jack answered, gently placing his hand on the dog's head. "This boy is recovering from trauma, and for now he lives with me." Ethan lowered himself carefully, trying not to startle Valor. He stretched out a small hand, not to touch, just resting in the air, like an unforced greeting. "Can I sit down?" Jack nodded, a faint smile briefly flickering on his lips, a rare sight since his return from service. Ethan sat down beside them, keeping a respectful distance, his eyes never leaving Valor. "I love dogs," he whispered. "We used to have one named Max, but he was old and went to sleep forever." Valor tilted his head, as if listening to the story. He sniffed lightly toward Ethan's hand, then turned away. No barking, no growling, a positive response beyond expectation. Jack watched silently. It was the first time Valor had interacted with someone other than a vet, or smelled medicine or surgical gloves. Just a child with clear eyes and a soft voice, and that was enough for the puppy not to turn away. In the days that followed, Ethan returned, sometimes bringing a small towel, sometimes a few old toys of Max's, sometimes just a few boiled carrot slices, he said. Valor might like these because Max used to. Jack didn't stop him. Instead, he found himself feeling softer each time he heard a gentle knock at the door in the afternoon. There was something very special about the connection between a child and a wounded dog. Ethan didn't ask too many questions, and didn't touch Valor when the boy still pulled away. But he would sit nearby, telling stories about school, firefly catching trips, and even bring picture books to read to Valor. The strange thing was that Valor started to respond. At first, a glance, then slowly blinking, then crawling closer. One day, when Ethan finished reading a passage, Valor automatically rested his head on the boy's lap. Ethan froze, then gently placed his hand on Valor's back, just a light touch like a passing breeze. Jack stood afar, arms crossed, but his eyes softened more than any treatment could. He knew that while he might be the one who saved Valor's life, Ethan, somehow, was the one helping the boy relearn how to trust purity. For adults, love often comes with reasons, but for children and animals, sometimes all it takes is a timely glance, enough patience, and a heart pure enough to make a frightened soul choose to come close. That night, after Ethan had gone home, and Valor rested his head on Jack's lap as usual, Jack bent down and whispered, "That kid is a lot like you. He lost a friend too, but still knows how to give again." Valor didn't answer, but his tail gave a light wag against the wooden floor, and Jack understood. A new chapter had begun. Not just recovery, but learning to live with others, learning to love again, without guarding. That afternoon, as Ethan quietly wrapped a small towel and a few slices of carrot into a cloth bag, and said goodbye to Jack with an innocent smile, Jack gave a slight nod in return, eyes following the boy's figure gradually disappearing behind the willow trees. Valor stood at the doorstep, his head slightly tilted toward the howling wind ripping through the trees, ears perked, intently listening for something seemingly approaching. Today's wind was different, not the gentle country breeze carrying the scent of fresh grass and damp earth, but fierce gusts howled in bursts, battering the old wooden walls, causing the front door of their rented house to tremble each time it was hit. Jack looked up at the darkening sky, deep ash gray without edges, without a single glimmer of light. It had been a long time since he'd seen Texas rage without warning. He had lived through fiery storms on the battlefield and heard the screams of artillery shells, But something in the suffocating silence of today's sky made him squeeze his hand tighter, and then turn to check every door, every socket, every water container. "Do you hear that?" Jack whispered to Valor, now stepping close to his feet, never leaving his side. "Looks like we're in for a long night." The radio playing from the kitchen started cutting out, then switched to an urgent warning. "Severe storm heading toward Travis County. Residents advised to stay indoors. Beware of flash floods, power outages, falling trees. Stay away from windows. Seek safe shelter." Jack wasn't panicked, but his vigilance immediately kicked in. Not just survival instinct, but because this time he was no longer alone. He bent down, gently tightened Valor's collar, then switched on a flashlight and checked the emergency cabinet beside the fireplace. When the light swept over Valor's face, the dog blinked slowly, then followed him like a shadow. No barking, no whining, but eyes constantly flicking upward to the ceiling where the wind shrieked through the roof gaps. Around 7 p.m., when the sun should have been peacefully setting behind the hills, darkness suddenly fell like an invisible hand had snuffed out the last rays. Then, the power went out. Valor startled. A sharp pop sounded from the switch near the window. The room plunged into thick darkness in an instant, and Jack heard Valor's nails scrape the wooden floor, followed by heavy breathing. "It's okay," he whispered, quickly kneeling beside Valor, hand pressed to the dog's chest, now trembling lightly. "We're fine, just a blackout." But Valor, though stronger now, was still the puppy once abandoned in scorching heat, once surrounded by vultures and frantic screams. To him, darkness, especially when it came suddenly, was a terrifying reminder of a forgotten moment. Jack flicked on the flashlight, the weak beam casting upward to the ceiling, just enough to chase away the swallowing darkness. He pulled a thick blanket from the bedroom, spread it on the floor, and then wrapped Valor in it, hands gently stroking the boy's back in a steady rhythm. Minutes later, as rain began pounding on the roof like war drums, Jack knew the storm was testing not just their home, but the fragile peace they had just built. And then came a horrific crack. A bone-chilling snap, like a tree trunk breaking in half, echoed from the back of the house. Jack jumped up, clutching Valor. "Come on, into the hallway." He barely caught the dog as a huge tree slammed into the back of the house, shattering a window, smashing an entire glass wall, and sending shards flying like hail. Jack held Valor tight, using his back as a shield while they pressed into the narrow door gap between the two hallway walls. Glass shards scraped his shoulder, dust filled the air, and water began flooding the floor. Valor let out a rare howl, not from pain, but fear of losing what he had just found again. "I'm here!" Jack gritted out firmly, holding him close. "I'm still here, it's okay. We'll get through this." At that moment, there was no war, no old wounds, and no other role than a man holding on to a small life to survive the ordeal together. By midnight, when the wind had calmed, the house was flooded above the floorboards. Part of the roof had been torn off. But amidst the scattered debris, two forms, a man and a dog, remained side by side, eyes never leaving each other for a second. Jack exhaled deeply, shivering from the cold, but unmoving. Valor lay close, resting his head on Jack's arm as if saying, "If I leave, the world will fall apart again." They had survived not because the house was strong, but because of the trust between two souls once abandoned, once broken, but still choosing to stand together when the storm came. The next morning, as early sunlight filtered through heavy clouds, the small rented house where Jack and Valor stayed was still suffused with the oppressive atmosphere of the storm the night before. Water stains on the old wooden floor spread like smears of dried blood, and a musty smell lingered. Jack sat quietly, eyes fixed on the puppy curled up on a thin blanket on the floor, Valor's gentle breathing bridging him to the present, to a fragile life barely held. Outside, the wind still whistled through gaps in the roof and broken windows. Shaking branches and dark gray clouds rushed by, promising a gloomy, challenging day ahead. But what caught Jack's breath was not the passing storm, but the scene before him. A massive, ancient oak tree, the symbol of Texas's endurance, now uprooted, wildly and tragically toppled right next to their small home. The oak, with its tangled roots like giant claws, had been torn from the earth, dragging heavy wet soil with it, smashing onto the rotted porch roof. The crashing sound echoed loudly, shaking the air and making everything reel in a whirl of chaos. Large broken wood pieces flew everywhere, dust billowing into thick clouds. Jack froze, heart pounding in his chest, his gaze fixed on the fallen oak trunk, its twisted branches sprawling across the wall and roof. He had never seen a symbol of life conquered so quickly and violently. Valor, lying beside him, immediately sprang up. The puppy trembled, ears perked, listening to every eerie sound. His eyes widened, full of alertness and panic, as if understanding the unpredictable danger rushing into the small world he was trying to rebuild. Jack hurriedly knelt, hugging Valor close, placing his hand on the trembling dog's head. "It's okay, Valor. I'm here. I won't leave you alone." His voice was gentle and steady, a soothing promise not only to the little dog but to himself, that whatever happened, they would get through it together. The wind outside continued to howl, whipping against broken glass and dry, brittle branches like invisible whips. Splinters fell to the floor, dirt and debris scattered wildly, thick clouds of dust choking the air. Valor curled up tighter, nestling into Jack's chest as if seeking warmth, protection, and a safe place amid the fierce storm. The little dog, who had endured harsh days, now faced the most terrifying trial of his young life. A storm not only toppling trees but testing faith and courage. But the miracle was that inside, the dog was no longer the lonely confusion from rescue day, but complete trust in the man shielding him. Jack held Valor tighter, using his own body as a shield against falling wood and debris. He felt the dog's heart pounding fast, breath short and trembling. Yet at that moment, amid chaos and danger, he understood more than ever that survival wasn't just an individual instinct. It was the blending of love and companionship, of two wounded beings, now ready to fight together to hold on to life. The storm shook the old house violently, but the love and bond between Jack and Valor stood firm like that ancient oak. Though the roots had fallen, the trunk broken, the spirit remained unyielding. As the noise gradually faded and the rain softened, Jack and Valor remained wrapped tightly in each other's arms, silent except for steady breathing and unwavering presence. Valor lay quietly in Jack's embrace, his head resting against Jack's chest as if saying, "I trust you." And Jack, deep inside, silently vowed never to betray that trust. By the dim light of the backup flashlight, Jack looked around the wrecked house, broken wooden shards, walls pocked with holes, water stains spreading everywhere. But in his eyes, it was just another challenge to overcome. A new chapter in the life he and Valor were stepping into. "We made it through a storm," Jack whispered, stroking Valor's back. "And whatever comes next, I will never leave you." Valor responded with a soft whimper, eyes moist but determined. The fierce storm had passed, leaving marks on the house and in the hearts of the two companions. But more importantly, it had tested and strengthened a profound bond, a bond that would be their anchor for the days ahead. As night fell softly after the fierce storm, the Texas sky calmed, leaving behind thinning clouds and twinkling stars against a damp horizon. The small rented house nestled beneath the oak tree now stood silent and peaceful after a night of turmoil. Yet inside, Jack and Valor stayed awake, clinging to each other as if they couldn't bear to be apart even for a second. The next morning, pale light filtered through the broken window, reflecting off peeling walls and puddles of rainwater on the wooden floor. The small space still smelled strongly of wet earth, rotting wood, and the faint scent of the half-burnt oil lamp. Jack looked out, his eyes filled with both worry and determination. The giant oak tree had been uprooted and toppled right beside the house. Its trunk crushed the porch roof and shattered part of the wooden wall. The rustling of fallen leaves and the whisper of the wind echoed through the wild garden, deepening the fragile, unstable feeling that clung to their temporary shelter. Jack stood up, stretching with a tight knot in his chest as he thought back on the past days. The storm seemed to symbolize all the hardships he and Valor had faced. Relentless challenges, near moments of despair, and times when giving up seemed inevitable. But now, the light of dawn infused them both with new strength. Valor lay quietly on an old blanket, the puppy's eyes less fearful now, shining with curiosity mixed with a fighting spirit. He glanced at Jack, seeming to understand the silent emotions in his companion's gaze. "We won't let this break us, Valor," Jack whispered, his voice low, warm and resolute. "We'll get back up, start over, and be stronger than ever before." They began clearing the debris piece by piece. Jack gathered the splintered wood with careful hands, as if trying to preserve some fragment of wholeness. Valor, though still weak and wobbly on his legs, stayed close beside him, eyes fixed steadily ahead, never straying. Each step Valor took was a step toward life itself. Every small breath a bridge between a painful past and a hopeful future. Watching the puppy struggle to stand firm, Jack felt a strange surge of faith. If Valor could overcome his fears and pain, then maybe he could find himself again too. Emily came to visit, bringing essential medical supplies, special food, and eyes full of hope. She gently stroked Valor and said to Jack, "He's improving fast, not just physically but mentally too. The faith and love you give him are the most precious medicine." Jack fell silent, staring at Valor, the little dog who was more than a fragile, abandoned creature, but an indispensable companion. He deeply felt that it wasn't just Valor being saved, but himself being healed, little by little, through every glance, every small gesture brimming with affection. Day by day, they faced challenges together, rebuilding a new life step by step. Valor began to accept love, to trust the world around him. The small dog was no longer shy or avoiding, but gradually learned to wag his tail in greeting, to bark softly in joy. Jack also began to open his heart, to life, to the people around him. Emily, the neighbor boy Ethan, and the simple things he once thought were lost. Every small laugh, every gentle look, every eager step Valor took became a powerful source of motivation. Hope rose like an unquenchable flame. Under the warm sunlight of a new day, Jack realized they hadn't just survived the storm. They were ready to start a new chapter, stronger and more complete than before. As the sun's weak light faded behind the Texas trees, inside the dim command room of the military K-9 training center in San Antonio, the atmosphere was thick with solemnity and secrecy. Captain Thomas Marshall, a powerful and cold man entrusted with leading the military K-9 training program, sat upright before a large computer screen. His face showed a mix of sternness and sharp calculation as his deep, dark eyes swiftly scanned the endless numbers, data, and images dancing across the monitor. Suddenly, one image froze, a photo showing the special tattoo on the puppy's thigh. This tattoo was the unique identifier possessed only by carefully selected dogs in the program. Marshall studied the blurred lines closely, his gaze hardening with anger and an unmistakable coldness. "Valor," he whispered, repeating the name like a curse, a challenge. To Captain Thomas Marshall, Valor was more than just a puppy. He was a symbol of failure that the military K-9 program could never allow. Born into a strict selection process, Valor had been deemed unfit, a label marking him for elimination. But the worst part was that Valor hadn't died, as the program declared. The puppy was alive, cared for by a soldier, slowly recovering and regaining strength. That was unacceptable to Marshall. He slammed his hand on the desk, clenching it tight as if to send power through the surface, his cold and authoritative gaze unyielding. "Valor must not be allowed to live free," he ordered in a voice that brooked no dissent. "He's a mistake the program must correct, no matter the cost." Marshall knew keeping Valor's existence secret wasn't just about personal safety or his reputation, but about protecting the entire program. Funded by millions and famous throughout the military. If Valor's survival was exposed, everything would collapse. The flaws and errors in the dog selection process would be revealed, raising a flood of ethical and accountability questions. He understood there was no choice but to act swiftly, secretly, and ruthlessly. Captain Marshall immediately assembled an elite task force, top trainers and security staff carefully chosen, people who had taken part in special operations and knew the importance of completing the mission at all costs. In a quick meeting inside the darkened conference room, maps and classified documents spread across the table, Marshall stood and spoke, decisively, like a commander issuing an unchallengeable order. "Valor survived, and that can't happen again. We will use every resource, every method, to retrieve the dog before anyone else learns the truth." The team members exchanged looks, understanding this was no ordinary mission. Each knew failure meant losing reputation and possibly facing severe consequences, even their careers. The pressure was heavy, but no one spoke, just nodded in agreement. The captain continued, "We must deploy tracking devices, intelligence information, and unexpected tactics. Every lead on Valor's and his protector's whereabouts must be exploited. We cannot let them escape." Meanwhile, in a nearby office, military intelligence personnel sifted through data, phone intercepts, satellite images, and civilian information linked to the area where Valor might be hiding. The investigators worked feverishly, feeling the gravity of a power struggle that could affect the entire K-9 program's fate and reputation. Captain Marshall was not only a cold man with sharp orders, but someone who had witnessed many military failures where the smallest mistake cost lives. He had built the program aiming to create the perfect warriors, machines that knew no fear and obeyed commands without question. Valor's unexpected survival was a direct challenge to those ideals. Yet, deep inside, perhaps Marshall never imagined a tiny puppy could consume so much of his mind, effort, and severity, not just for fame, but for control and power. Contrasting the cold loneliness in Marshall's office, a quiet hunt was beginning. Far away, Jack and Valor innocently enjoyed each moment of recovery, unaware of the captain's icy gaze tracking their every move through layers of classified intelligence. Valor, the little dog with extraordinary courage, had become the center of a hidden war, not just for his life, but for truth, loyalty, and faith all weighed on the scales. And in Jack's eyes, no one could understand or protect Valor better than himself, the man who had witnessed firsthand the power hidden in each fragile breath of the puppy. The hunt for Valor had begun, a battle between love and power, between the light of life and the shadow of control, between sincere loyalty and cold calculation. After those rare, peaceful days with Valor, Jack began to sense a clear change in the atmosphere around him. Somehow, darkness had quietly crept into their simple life, bringing signs that could no longer be ignored. One morning, while Jack was walking Valor along the small road near their home, the puppy's eyes suddenly grew alert. He stopped, tilting his head slightly, ears perked, staring toward a sleek black car passing by slowly. Jack immediately turned his head to follow it, feeling a cold shiver run down his spine. The stalking was no longer just imagination. They appeared stealthily in hidden corners, in the shadows of streets and wild fields around the rented house. Strange glances flickered whenever Jack stepped outside, unfamiliar cars tracing his steps every time he went to work or came back. One night, as Jack rested beside Valor, his phone kept vibrating with anonymous messages. The brief, cold texts read, "Stop or face consequences." The phone's ring repeated like the echo of a terrifying warning. Jack sat silently in the dark, his heart heavy as he read each message. He knew these were not baseless threats, but cold orders from the antagonists trying to silence the truth he guarded. The truth about Valor, the brave puppy who had been rejected and nearly erased from history. Yet fear did not make Jack back down. Instead, it sparked a fire of determination in his heart. He understood more clearly than ever that Valor's survival was not just a personal fight, but a struggle for justice and a hidden truth. In the hardest moments, Jack found strength in Valor's steadfast eyes, clear but deep, holding a world of faith within. Every time Valor nuzzled into his chest, gently placing a small paw in his hand, as if to say, "We are not alone," Jack felt an invisible bond between them, a silent yet powerful companionship. Jack was more than a protector. He was a friend, a companion, the only one who could understand and share Valor's wounds. He knew those threats were not only aimed at him, but also served as warnings for the puppy's safety. Long nights awake beside Valor found Jack gently stroking every strand of fur, every steady breath as if passing on a deep comfort. In the quiet of their small room, two souls beat in harmony, holding hands tightly to overcome every danger. The pressure from the stalking and threats grew stronger, but it was also the clearest proof of the truth's value they carried. No matter how dense the darkness became, Jack knew he could not let go and could not give up this fight, because beside him was Valor, the puppy who was not only a symbol of courage, but also an endless source of strength, a guiding light in the nights of the challenges ahead. After long nights filled with pressure, when strange noises and shadows of stalking still haunted him, Jack realized that protecting Valor had gone beyond what he could handle alone. The puppy's safety could not rely on his own strong will or strength. A solid network of companions with understanding hearts and professional expertise was essential. On a rainy afternoon in Austin, Jack decided to seek out Rachel Simmons, a renowned lawyer specializing in human rights and animal protection. Rachel's office was on a quiet little street, filled with natural light and shelves packed with legal documents, along with paintings of animal protection campaigns stretching across the walls, all reflecting seriousness and dedication. When Jack entered, he brought not only his story, but a plea for Valor's life. Rachel, with soft brown hair and eyes sharp yet warm, listened carefully to every word Jack said. He spoke about Valor, the brave puppy who had been abandoned and nearly died on the harsh Texas land, about the difficult days, the times Valor struggled between life and death, and most of all, about the forces trying to silence that truth. Every detail and every emotion in Jack's story resonated with Rachel as if she were facing a life-or-death battle where truth and justice were the guiding light. Rachel understood that to help Jack and Valor, she needed not only sharp legal knowledge, but also persistence and passion to fight against powerful forces and dark tricks. However, the legal journey could not begin without convincing evidence and medical confirmation from dedicated experts. Emily Carter, the veterinarian who cared for Valor during the hardest early days, provided them with the most vivid and valuable proof. Emily documented every step of recovery, every physical and mental wound Valor endured. The detailed reports and recovery images she prepared were not just medical records, but powerful evidence of Valor's fierce life and the cruelty of those who wanted to erase him. In the days that followed, Jack, Rachel, and Emily became an inseparable team. They worked together with deep seriousness and devotion. Every document and every piece of evidence was collected and analyzed meticulously. Rachel built sharp legal arguments combined with specific medical proof provided by Emily to create a strong case defending Valor against all risks. At every meeting, Valor was there beside Jack, like a loyal friend who never left his side. The puppy seemed to sense that this was an important journey, not just for his own life, but for higher values: love, loyalty, and justice. Valor's clear, trusting eyes followed every affectionate gesture from Jack, and every careful touch from Emily, as if saying, "We are not alone. We will fight to the end." It was not just professional collaboration, but a bond of people sharing the same goal and heart. Jack found in Rachel an ally ready to use the law to protect the vulnerable, and in Emily, a friend always willing to sacrifice to care for and heal Valor. This trust, sharing, and commitment formed a strong network, a foundation for both Jack and Valor in the difficult days ahead. The challenging legal journey was still long, full of obstacles and storms, but with Rachel and Emily's support, Jack felt no longer alone. They were friends, protectors, and silent warriors in a fight not just to save a puppy's life, but to defend truth and justice. Under the gentle glow of the desk lamp in the lawyer's office, Jack looked down at Valor sleeping peacefully in his arms, his heart full of hope and determination. He knew that with this support network, Valor would never face danger alone again, and neither would he. Once Jack's determination to protect Valor was strengthened by the support of lawyer Rachel Simmons and veterinarian Emily Carter, he stepped into a completely new chapter, a relentless legal battle to bring the light of justice to the hidden corners of the military K-9 training program. Rachel's office became the center of tense, passionate efforts. Documents, medical reports, Valor's recovery photos, witness statements, and files gathered from secret sources were carefully spread across the table. The atmosphere was solemn, yet charged with gravity, where even the smallest detail could become decisive evidence determining the fate of the puppy and the hidden truth. Jack stood nearby, his eyes full of resolve and a hint of fatigue, but never defeated. He looked down at Valor sleeping quietly beside him, overwhelmed by a profound emotion. This was not just a fight for a small life, but for human values, fairness, and unconditional loyalty. Rachel worked tirelessly with her legal team, reviewing every law, preparing sharp arguments, and anticipating every possible scenario for the court hearings. She was not just a lawyer, but a warrior on the legal front, a mother of justice for those without a voice. Emily closely monitored Valor's health, not only providing precise medical evidence, but also serving as a witness to the physical and psychological wounds Valor had endured. She meticulously documented every detail of the puppy's progress, from his first shaky steps to the earliest signs of trust and joy. Every time Emily brought the files to Rachel and Jack, Valor's eyes followed as if knowing he was protected not only by human strength, but also by justice and sincerity. The puppy's presence in the small meeting room was a vivid reminder of why everyone was working tirelessly. The legal battle officially began when Rachel filed a lawsuit in federal court, accusing the K-9 program of severe ethical violations and cover-ups. At the same time, retaliation from the opposing side started. Threatening calls, anonymous messages, and obstructive actions aimed at shaking Jack's and his team's resolve. Still, the unity of Jack, Rachel, and Emily remained unshaken. They faced every challenge together, preparing for fierce trials with the firm belief that justice would prevail. Valor became the focus of public attention, a small puppy with a miraculous survival story and a resilient spirit that touched many hearts. Photos and videos documenting his recovery spread widely, drawing community and media interest and putting strong pressure on the antagonists. Under increasing public scrutiny, the K-9 program adjusted its tactics, issuing statements trying to deny and cover up, but all lies gradually unraveled under the spotlight of law and public concern. The first trial opened with Jack, Rachel, Emily, and Valor, the small yet strong puppy, a silent warrior standing at the crossroads of truth and justice. Every testimony, every piece of evidence was a building block in the wall of justice, but also a great challenge to the emotions and perseverance of those involved. Jack knew a long and harsh journey still lay ahead, but with a strong network and unyielding spirit, he believed Valor would live, and the puppy's story would become a symbol of the power of love and loyalty, overcoming all trials. The cold white lights illuminated the courtroom, where every word and every glance carried the weight of life and justice. The trial officially began, bringing an almost suffocating tension. Jack stood beside lawyer Rachel Simmons and veterinarian Emily Carter, feeling his rapid breaths alongside the rare calm in Valor's determined eyes. The small puppy full of courage. From the very first moments, the opposing side employed every sophisticated tactic to refute the evidence Jack's team presented. They launched a comprehensive assault, not only denying the authenticity of medical reports and Valor's recovery photos, but also questioning the credibility of testimonies, aiming to sow doubt in the court and public about the plaintiff's honesty. Opposing lawyers relentlessly fired sharp and sometimes harsh questions to shake Rachel's and Emily's confidence. They stressed that the K-9 program enforced strict standards to ensure mission effectiveness, and that removing dogs that failed to meet criteria was an essential part of professional training. Their cold arguments struck like a sharp sword aimed directly at the hearts of Valor's supporters. Jack felt the tension like a dark cloud swirling overhead, his heart pounding, cold sweat trickling down his forehead. He looked at Valor, the tiny dog lying peacefully in his arms, eyes shining with trust and strength. Valor was not just a fragile creature. He was a symbol of faith and courage, the reason Jack could not fall, no matter the mounting difficulties. Emily rose, her voice warm yet firm, detailing Valor's recovery process, the undeniable physical and psychological injuries, and the compelling medical evidence she had gathered. Her eyes held deep love, moving some in the courtroom, gradually easing their doubts. Rachel continuously argued, defending every detail in the legal files, fighting tirelessly to uphold truth and justice. She knew this was more than a legal case. It was a fight to reclaim the life of a small being for moral and human values under threat. Despite the pressure and relentless attacks from the opposition, Jack remained steadfast. He knew that if he faltered in this trial, it would not only threaten Valor's life, but also shake faith in justice and love. In the heavy atmosphere, Valor suddenly shivered, ears perked, eyes following Jack's every step. That small gesture seemed to fuel everyone fighting alongside him, a reminder that though small, love and life are always stronger than any challenge. The trial's climax was not only in the sharp debates, but in the invisible power created by the love and loyalty between Jack and Valor. Every small bark and every trusting look from Valor seemed to light hope in the hearts of those who loved the puppy. As sincere testimonies and irrefutable evidence began to emerge, the wall of doubt from the opposition slowly crumbled. Yet the challenge was far from over. Hearings dragged on, pressure mounting, demanding Jack's team to be more persistent and resilient than ever. Jack understood there were still many long roads ahead, many storms, and unforeseen trials. But with a strong network and unbreakable spirit, he believed Valor would not only survive, but also become an immortal symbol of the power of love and faith. After the tense days of the trial, with relentless pressure from the antagonists weighing heavily on Jack's shoulders, he began to realize that the danger was not confined to courtrooms or legal battles. It was lurking dangerously close in his everyday life. It wasn't just invisible threats. The presence of darkness, silent footsteps, and cold, watchful eyes shadowed him every time he stepped outside, making Jack's heart race with anxiety and constant vigilance. One drizzly afternoon, walking along the narrow road from lawyer Rachel's office back to their rented house on the outskirts, Jack moved alongside Valor, the small but resilient puppy. The air was thick with dampness and gloom, cold winds rustling through ancient trees like whispered warnings. Valor stayed close, his bright, alert eyes scanning every corner, ears perked to catch the faintest sound. The quiet path suddenly grew heavy, as heavy, quick footsteps echoed from the dark alley nearby. Jack turned to see a group dressed in dark clothes with cold, sharp eyes, stern faces, and bodies ready for ill intent. They were the antagonists, people who would stop at nothing to block Jack's legal fight, to deny Valor's existence and the truth. Though small in size, Valor instantly shifted from calm to maximum alertness. The puppy didn't just bark a warning but stood firm, his body tense as if ready to charge and protect his companion. The bark echoed like an alarm bell, brave and decisive, cutting through the silence of the narrow alley. Jack felt a powerful energy radiating from Valor, the dog's gaze following the approaching figures with unwavering resolve and loyalty. At that moment, Valor was no longer just a little dog, but a true warrior, the most faithful companion and the sole protector amid the looming danger. The strangers advanced, but Valor's barking and fierce reaction surprised and unsettled them. The growls mixed with barks formed an invisible yet unbreakable shield, forcing the antagonists to hesitate, unwilling to risk a direct attack. In that perilous moment, Jack stepped back, heart pounding but filled with trust in Valor. Quickly he pulled out his phone and called Rachel and Emily, the most trusted allies in this legal battle, for help and to prepare a response. Every move Valor made seemed driven by an instinctive protective force. The little dog shifted positions and raised his barks higher to warn of danger, guarding Jack bit by bit. Valor's clear but sharp eyes sent a clear message: "I will never leave my master alone." After a few tense minutes, the distant sound of police sirens broke through, causing the strangers to panic and vanish into the darkness. Jack breathed a sigh of relief, looking down at Valor, standing steady beside him, eyes calm yet full of strength and courage. That moment became a milestone not only in Jack's life, but a vivid testament to the unbreakable bond between him and Valor. Jack understood that the puppy was not merely a creature to protect, but his protector, the most loyal friend, the silent warrior who had saved him from potentially dire consequences. In the days that followed, this event became a warm flame lighting Jack's heart, helping him overcome fears and pressure. Each time he sat beside Valor, stroking his silky fur, he felt the boundless strength and love from the puppy, a driving force to continue the legal fight and protect his faithful friend's life. Through every small action and every trusting glance, Valor became a symbol not only of courage, but of fierce belief in life and justice. Their friendship and companionship formed an endless source of strength, helping Jack and Valor persist on the challenging road ahead. After the harrowing moment when Valor used his courage and protective instincts to save Jack's life, the soldier felt reborn with a new, powerful source of strength, full of inspiration. It was not just physical safety, but a flame ignited deep in his soul, an unprecedented fire of will, steadfastness, and boundless love for his loyal four-legged friend. As the soft golden light fell on the small living room, where they were staying temporarily, Jack sat beside Valor. The dog no longer the small, fragile creature he once was, but now strong and confident. He stroked Valor's smooth fur, whose bright, lively eyes seemed to pour endless energy into him. Every breath, every exhale was a heartbeat of life, faith, and hope. Jack knew this comeback was not merely a recovery, but a powerful rebirth of a soul once deeply wounded. Valor was a living testament to that resurrection, from days battling on the edge of death to today, when the puppy became a symbol of courage and unyielding resilience. Not only Valor, but also Jack was strengthened by a network of supporters. Lawyer Rachel Simmons, with her sharp arguments and tireless passion, veterinarian Emily Carter, with her love for Valor and dedication to her work, and a community of animal lovers and justice advocates watching and cheering their fight. Every word of encouragement and every act of support washed over Jack like warm waves, helping him stand firm and keep moving forward on the path to reclaim truth and justice for Valor. Gone were the lonely, anxious days, replaced by unity, sharing, and growing faith each day. Jack returned to the courtroom with a completely different spirit. He entered not just as a brave soldier, but as a defender of truth, an inspiration to many following Valor's story. Every step carried the power of love, loyalty, and unwavering determination. Valor had also grown immensely. The once tiny puppy now barked loudly and ran joyfully in the yard, his eyes shining with absolute trust in Jack. Every time Jack looked at Valor, he saw himself, a warrior who had suffered much but always rose and fought on. The subsequent trials became not just places to present legal evidence, but stages for a living story of survival, love, and loyalty, overcoming all trials. Jack and Rachel seized every chance to recount Valor's miraculous resurrection, from painful days near death to a powerful comeback as a fierce warrior. That story touched the hearts of judges and lawyers alike and moved millions through the media. The online community, animal lovers, justice seekers, and those who had faced loss or pain all found Valor a symbol of hope and strength. Jack's spirit and perseverance, along with Valor's miraculous recovery, became an endless inspiration to many. They understood that life might be full of challenges and hardships, but with love, loyalty, and faith, nothing was insurmountable. Jack gazed at Valor in the morning light, his heart filled with deep gratitude and love. He knew the journey ahead was long, with many challenges waiting, but he no longer feared, because beside him was always Valor, the loyal friend, the warrior who never gave up, and a network of loved ones standing with him for truth and justice. After long days of perseverance and determination on the legal front, Jack and his companions decided to bring Valor's story, the brave German shepherd, into the light, turning it from a private battle into a collective voice for loving hearts, for those fighting for truth and justice. The press conference was held in a small but cozy hall right in the city center, gathering numerous reporters and journalists from major and minor TV and print outlets, alongside many pet lovers and animal rights advocates. The auditorium was filled with lights, camera flashes, microphones, and watchful eyes following every move of Jack and Valor, the dog who had become a vivid symbol of courage and resilience. Jack stepped up to the podium, with Valor by his side, the loyal friend, the four-legged warrior who had overcome countless challenges with him. His eyes shone with confidence mingled with fatigue, now replaced by fierce determination, and his words echoed through the silent room. I found Valor in a state of near exhaustion, abandoned under the burning Texas sun, surrounded by vultures waiting for his final moment. But Valor is more than just a dog. He is a symbol of life, of undying hope, of extraordinary courage overcoming every hardship. Jack recounted every moment he discovered Valor, the little dog's struggle to survive, and the miraculous recovery under the dedicated care of veterinarian Emily Carter. He grew emotional, recalling Valor's trembling in sleep from psychological trauma, his first shaky steps, and the growing trust reflected in the puppy's eyes. Beside him, Rachel Simmons, the representing lawyer, shared irrefutable evidence of serious misconduct in the canine training program, about the cruel elimination of dogs that failed standards, and the harsh cover-up by a system many once trusted. Rachel's eyes gleamed with resolve. We fight not just for Valor, but for hundreds, thousands of other lives treated cruelly and forgotten in the shadows. Justice cannot remain silent in the face of this truth. Images were projected onto a large screen. Valor lying by the roadside, fur dirty and matted, eyes glistening with tears, photos of Valor's gradual recovery and Emily's treatments, and finally, Valor strong and healthy beside Jack, a living symbol of hope and love. The room fell silent, everyone captivated by Valor's moving and powerful story. Questions flowed from TV reporters, journalists, and the live audience, all eager to understand the puppy's journey through hardship and the unwavering love and patience of the man who protected him. Jack and Rachel answered each question honestly and clearly, never shying away from difficulties. They shared sleepless nights beside Valor, threats received, and the puppy's loyal, unbreakable spirit. Every story and every shared word ignited flames of belief and stirred deep empathy in everyone present. Emily, who witnessed Valor's miraculous resurrection from near death, also spoke. Valor is not just a patient. He is a teacher, showing us lessons in resilience and boundless love. Through this little dog, I believe every life deserves love and protection. The press conference ended with prolonged applause, bright eyes, and hearts full of hope from everyone present. Valor's story spread widely across social media, sparking a strong wave of support. Animal lovers, advocacy groups, and those who had experienced loss or trauma found in Valor a symbol of life, survival, and unyielding courage. Jack looked at Valor with overwhelming gratitude and pride. He knew this was only the beginning of a long journey, but with the strong support from the community, he and Valor would no longer be alone. They would continue to fight, not only for themselves, but for thousands of lives needing a voice, a guiding light. In the shimmering evening light, amidst congratulations and warm cheers, Jack and Valor stood together as living proof that no matter the hardships, love and loyalty will always prevail, and the truth will always be honored. After months of persistent fighting on all fronts, from the courtroom to the media and the community, Jack and his team finally received a landmark ruling, not only for Valor, but for the entire military K-9 training sector, which had long been admired but also concealed many dark secrets. The trial concluded with a stern judgment. The K-9 training program was heavily criticized and held accountable for abandoning and mistreating dogs that failed to meet standards, including Valor. The entire training system was placed under strict government oversight, with demands for comprehensive reform to ensure the rights and safety of dogs serving in the military. Alongside this, a nationwide investigation was launched, delving into every corner of training centers. Serious violations, abandonment, cruel treatment, and cover-ups of K-9 abuse were exposed. Individuals responsible, from top officials to frontline staff, were summoned, thoroughly investigated, and legally sanctioned to clarify and punish unethical acts that violated animal welfare principles. Among them, those directly or indirectly involved in abandoning Valor, the dog now seen as a miraculous symbol of rebirth, were severely condemned and could not escape the law's reach. Subsequent trials made clear that justice never sleeps on wrongdoing, no matter the level. Valor's story also inspired a strong wave of support from animal lovers nationwide. Animal protection organizations quickly voiced support, joining lawyer Rachel Simmons and veterinarian Emily Carter in creating rescue programs for K-9 dogs previously abandoned or suffering physical and psychological trauma. Many dogs once left in the cold shadows of training centers were rescued into warm, loving homes. They received attentive medical care and underwent difficult but hopeful recoveries. Valor, with his deeply moving story, became a representative and source of inspiration for hundreds of these small lives, a testament that life is always worth cherishing and protecting. Rescue and rehabilitation centers for former K-9 dogs received widespread financial and media support. New policies were established to ensure no more abandonment or mistreatment of dogs in training programs, while also improving the quality of life and welfare for military service dogs. Beyond legal reforms, Jack and Valor's story sparked profound social awareness. People began to see K-9 dogs not just as combat tools, but as sentient beings capable of love and deserving of care and respect like any other life. Jack and Valor continued to appear at community events, conferences, and educational programs to share their story and inspire animal lovers and military personnel about ethical responsibilities toward these four-legged friends. They became symbols of resilience, loyalty, and unconditional love. Amid all these changes, Jack never ceased looking at Valor with eyes full of love and pride. The small dog, once abandoned, had become an indispensable source of strength, living proof of a brighter future, where vulnerable lives are not left behind, but cherished and protected. The transformation in the K9 sector was not just about technical or administrative reform, but a community awakening, a fusion of justice and compassion, responsibility and love, creating sustainable values for both humans and animals in life. After all the storms and harsh challenges, Jack and Valor finally found a peaceful haven where both their souls and bodies could heal. They moved to a small farm nestled just outside San Antonio, surrounded by vast, serene spaces filled with the lush green of nature. That farm was not just a new home, but a sanctuary where both Jack and Valor could rediscover themselves. For Jack, a soldier who had endured so much loss and pain, it was a precious resting place where he could breathe deeply, listen to birds singing and the rustling wind, and feel a peace he once thought lost forever. Valor, after a difficult recovery journey, had grown into a healthy, strong, and vibrant dog. No longer the trembling pup on dusty roads, Valor now had sleek, shiny fur, eyes bright with trust, and a warrior spirit that was strong yet gentle. In this peaceful farm, Valor was not only Jack's loyal companion walking by his side, but also a special rescue dog, working alongside other veterans, those who had fought alongside Jack on battlefields and were now seeking peace in daily life. Valor helped these veterans face their nightmares and painful memories with his gentle presence and unwavering loyalty. He healed not only physical wounds, but also soothed deep emotional scars, offering comfort and new hope. Together, Jack and Valor built training sessions and therapy activities using dogs for the veteran community, creating a place that both healed and connected people. Each day, under the warm Texas sun, laughter, calls, and Valor's joyful barking blended into a gentle symphony of life and love. Jack knew their journey was not just about legal battles or past trials, but had become a greater mission: to spread love, the power of life, and perseverance through adversity to all who suffer. In the sunset, glowing red on the horizon, Jack watched Valor running freely across the vast fields, his heart full of gratitude. They had found each other in the darkest moments and now walked forward together, building a new life, peaceful, meaningful, and full of hope. The first dawn of a new day broke with gentle warmth, spreading across the vast green fields where Jack and Valor had chosen their new home. This wide space was not just a place to breathe and run, but a symbol of freedom, renewal, and enduring vitality. Jack stood silently beside Valor, gazing at his loyal dog with eyes full of gratitude and happiness beyond words. He recalled harsh days when Valor was a tiny, fragile pup curled up in scorching dust, surrounded by vultures and near death. That story, now a painful yet powerful memory, was a living testament to an indomitable will to overcome fate. Valor, now with sleek black fur, a sturdy build and bright eyes, was no longer the vulnerable creature of the past, but a symbol of courage, of rebirth from darkness. The dog ran toward Jack with energetic steps, head slightly bowed, tail wagging gently as if to say that the arduous journey was not in vain, and now it was time to enjoy peace and happiness. Jack knelt, wrapping Valor in an embrace, a perfect moment of friendship and loyalty. No words could express the overwhelming emotions and deep gratitude for the companion who had stood with him through life's toughest trials. Two wounded souls who had once fallen now stood strong and inseparable. Together they ran across the sprawling green grass, the sound of their footsteps pounding the earth mingling with Valor's breathing. creating a lively rhythm, a reminder of life's strength and hope. The vast fields were not only a physical space, but a symbol of an open future, where pain and loss were only memories of the past. Under the brilliant dawn light, Jack felt clearly that life still held wonders worth cherishing. Despite all hardships, he understood that the friendship between him and Valor was more than a simple bond between human and animal. It was proof of the power of love, loyalty, and undying hope. Amid the vibrant nature, Jack silently vowed that no matter how long or difficult the journey ahead, he would always be with Valor, together writing the ongoing story of life, friendship, and salvation. They were not just a soldier and a rescue dog, but two warriors of life, fighting together, rising together, and enjoying the joy of living. That picture, Jack and Valor running on the wide meadow under the radiant dawn, is an eternal symbol of an unbreakable bond, a message of fierce vitality and hope that exists even in the toughest circumstances. They proved that friendship and love can heal all wounds, overcome all trials, and light the way for souls seeking peace. And so Jack and Valor's story closes in the radiant light of a new day, not an end, but a declaration of an endless journey of friendship, courage, and undying faith. Thank you for taking the time to follow the emotional journey of Jack and Valor, their story of overcoming hardship, a testament to the power of courage and the unbreakable friendship between humans and animals. This story is not just a rescue, but a symbol of hope, perseverance, and fierce vitality, even in the harshest conditions. What do you think about this special bond? Have you or your loved ones had profound experiences with four-legged friends in life? Share your story below so we can create a community full of love and sharing. If you find this story inspiring and meaningful, don't forget to like, share this video with others, and subscribe to continue joining us in more touching, powerful stories. Thank you so much for being part of this journey of spreading love